The crystal chamber of Valarian Prime stretched upward for nearly a mile. Its walls were made of living stone that pulsed with soft blue light. 12 massive seats formed a circle at the center, and in each seat sat a representative of the elder species. These were the beings who had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. They had watched stars die and be reborn. They had seen countless civilizations rise and fall. They believed they had seen everything. High Chancellor Zethros sat in the largest seat. His body was covered in silver scales that shifted color when he moved. His eyes were deep black pools that held the wisdom of ages. He raised one clawed hand and the chamber fell silent. "We gathered today to discuss a matter of grave concern," Zethros said. His voice echoed through the chamber like rolling thunder. "The Krath hegemony has begun its cleansing of the Outer Rim territories. 7 species have already been destroyed. Their worlds burn as we speak." A murmur passed through the assembled representatives. The Krath were known to all of them. They were a warrior species who believed the galaxy belonged only to the strong. For centuries, they had stayed within their own borders, content to fight among themselves. But something had changed. Their new supreme commander, a brutal tactician named Varth, had united the Krath clans under a single purpose. They would purge the galaxy of what they called lesser species. "We have received reports of their fleet movements," continued Zethros. "They are assembling over 10,000 warships at the Morth Nebula. From there, they intend to sweep through the Outer Rim and eliminate all species who cannot defend themselves." Representative Malox of the Sindari Collective leaned forward. Her form was made entirely of crystalline energy, and her voice chimed like bells. "What do you propose we do, High Chancellor? The Krath have made no moves against any Council species. Our treaties with them remain intact." "That is precisely the problem," Zethros replied. "We are bound by our own laws. We cannot intervene unless a Council member is directly threatened." The chamber doors opened with a soft hiss. Every eye turned to see a single figure walking across the polished floor. She was small compared to the massive beings around her. Her skin was soft and brown, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a simple gray uniform with a small blue planet embroidered on her shoulder. Her name was Katie Morrison, and she was the only human in the room. Katie had served as humanity's ambassador to the Galactic Concil for 3 years. In that time, she had learned to read the expressions of beings who had no faces. She had learned to speak softly to creatures who could crush her with a thought. She had learned patience in a room full of immortals who measured time in centuries rather than days. She stopped at the center of the circle and bowed her head in respect. "Ambassador Morrison," said Zethros, "you requested permission to address the Council. You may speak." Katie straightened her spine and looked up at the towering figures around her. Her heart was beating fast, but her voice did not shake. "High Chancellor, honored representatives, I come before you today to make a simple request. As you know, Earth lies directly in the path of the Krath advance. Our world is home to 8 billion souls. We have families, children, dreams, and hopes just like any other species in this galaxy. We ask for your help." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Representative Draxus of the Thornvar Empire let out a sound that might have been a laugh. His body was covered in thick black armor, and his 4 arms were crossed over his chest. "You ask for our help?" he said. "Little human, do you understand what you face? The Krath have 10,000 warships. Your species has been spacefaring for barely 40 years. You have no fleet. You have no weapons worth mentioning. You have nothing." Katie met his gaze without flinching. "We have our people." "Your people will be ash within a month," Draxus replied. "The Krath do not negotiate. They do not take prisoners. They cleanse. It is what they do." High Chancellor Zethros raised his hand to quiet the chamber. His ancient eyes studied the small human woman with something that might have been pity. "Ambassador Morrison, I understand your fear. I truly do. But Representative Draxus speaks the truth. Humanity is not a council species. You have no formal alliance with any of our members. Our laws do not permit us to intervene on your behalf." "Then change your laws," Katie said simply. A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. No species had ever spoken so directly to the council. Zethros tilted his head, and his scales shifted from silver to a deep purple. "Our laws have stood for 50,000 years, he said slowly. "They have maintained peace and order across 1,000 star systems. We do not change them for any reason." Katie nodded. She had expected this answer. She had prepared for it. "I understand," she said. "And I want you to understand something as well. Humanity did not come here to beg. We came here to offer you a warning." The chamber fell completely silent. Even the soft hum of the living walls seemed to fade away. "A warning?" Zethros asked. What warning could humanity possibly offer to this council? Kitty reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. She pressed a button, and a holographic image appeared in the air before her. It showed a map of the galaxy with the Krath territory marked in red. "The Krath are coming for us," Katie said. "That is true. But we are not afraid. We've spent the last 40 years preparing for this moment. We have built things in the darkness where no one was watching. We have created weapons that your sensors cannot detect. We have trained soldiers who fear nothing." She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of each representative in turn. "We came here today as a courtesy. We wanted to give you a chance to help us. But we do not need your help. We will handle the Krath ourselves." Draxus laughed again. "You are delusional. Your species will be wiped from existence." Katie smiled. And there was something in that smile that made even the immortal beings of the council feel a chill run through their ancient bones. "The Krath believe they are predators," she said. "They believe we are prey. They are wrong. Humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that nearly destroyed us. We have clawed our way up from the mud to reach the stars. We do not die easily." She turned off the holographic display and returned the device to her pocket. "When the Krath come for Earth, they will learn what happens when you corner a species that refuses to submit. They will learn that humanity is not prey." She bowed her head once more to the council. "Stay out of our way. That is all we ask." Then she turned and walked out of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. High Chancellor Zethros watched her go, and for the first time in 10,000 years, he felt uncertain about the future. "What do we do?" asked Representative Malox. Zethros did not answer for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "We wait. And we watch. Something tells me we are about to witness something the galaxy has never seen before." 40 years earlier, the sky above Earth had filled with strange lights. People around the world looked up in wonder and fear as massive ships descended through the clouds. The Valith had come to study the small blue planet and its curious inhabitants. They stayed for 3 days. They scanned everything. They recorded the wars being fought across the continents. They measured the pollution in the air and the radiation from old nuclear tests. They watched humans kill each other over land, resources, and ideas. Then they left, having decided that this primitive species was of no importance. But the Valith made a mistake. They did not know that human scientists had intercepted their scans. They did not know that brilliant minds at secret facilities around the world had decoded their transmissions. And they did not know what humans discovered when they listened to those alien signals. The galaxy was not a peaceful place. It was a hunting ground. General Samuel Drake was 62 years old when the aliens came. He had fought in 3 wars and had seen the worst that humanity could do to itself. But nothing prepared him for what he learned from those intercepted transmissions. There were thousands of species out there among the stars. Some were peaceful, many were not, and the powerful ones did whatever they wanted to the weak. Drake gathered the leaders of every major nation in a bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps. He showed them the translations of the alien communications. He showed them the records of species that had been wiped out by the Krath and others like them. He showed them the future that awaited Earth if they did nothing. For the first time in human history, every nation agreed on something. They would prepare, they would build, and they would never let the galaxy know what they were doing. The project was given a simple name: Fortress. Over the next 4 decades, humanity poured its greatest resources into a single goal. They would create a fleet capable of defending Earth against any threat. Admiral Daniel Hayes took command of Fortress when he was just 35 years old. He was tall and lean, with gray eyes that missed nothing. He had spent his entire career in the Navy, rising through the ranks by being smarter and tougher than everyone around him. When Drake chose him to lead humanity's secret military, he accepted without hesitation. The first challenge was building ships without anyone noticing. The answer came from a young engineer named Laura Bennett. She had wild red hair and a mind that worked faster than any computer. She designed shipyards that could be hidden inside asteroids. She created construction facilities on the dark side of the moon where no alien satellite would ever look. She built orbital platforms, wrapped in sensor-dampening fields that made them invisible to everything but human eyes. The second challenge was technology. Human weapons were primitive compared to what the aliens used. A single Valith cruiser could destroy every military force on Earth without breaking a sweat. Something had to change. That task fell to Dr. Benjamin Cole. He was a quiet man with thick glasses and a gentle voice. But behind those glasses was the most brilliant scientific mind humanity had ever produced. He studied the scraps of alien technology that human agents had quietly collected over the years. He took apart their energy weapons and figured out how they worked. Then he made them better. Cole discovered that alien species had grown lazy over the centuries. They used the same designs their ancestors had created thousands of years ago. They never improved. They never pushed the boundaries of what was possible. They believed they were already perfect. Humans were different. Humans were never satisfied. When Cole built his first plasma cannon, it was twice as powerful as anything the Valith had. When he designed human shields, they could absorb 3 times as much damage. When he created the antimatter warheads, even he was frightened by what they could do. Admiral Hayes watched the fleet grow year by year. In the first decade, they built 50 ships in secret. In the second decade, they built 200 more. By the third decade, the underground shipyards were producing vessels at an incredible rate. Engineers worked in shifts around the clock. Scientists pushed the limits of human knowledge. Soldiers trained for a war they hoped would never come. The USS Iron Resolve was the crown jewel of the fleet. She was half a mile long and carried enough firepower to crack a planet in 2. Her hull was made of a material that Cole had invented, something he called adaptive armor. It could repair itself in battle and grow stronger against whatever weapon was used against it. Her engines could push her faster than any ship the galaxy had ever seen. Hayes stood on the bridge of the Iron, Resolve for the first time on a quiet Tuesday morning. He ran his hand along the command console and felt the power humming beneath his fingers. This was not just a ship. This was humanity's answer to a universe that wanted them dead. 40 years passed. The fleet grew to 3,000 ships. Every vessel was crewed by men and women who understood what they were fighting for. They were not soldiers seeking glory. They were protectors ready to die for their home. Then word came of the Krath advance. Hayes was in his quarters when Commander Ryan Peters brought him the report. Peters was young and eager, with short brown hair and a scar across his chin from a training accident. He handed the datapad to his admiral with shaking hands. "Sir, the Krath have declared their intention to cleanse the Outer Rim. Earth is on their list." Hayes read the report without expression. He had known this day would come. He had spent 40 years preparing for it. "How long until they reach us?" he asked. "They are assembling at the Morth Nebula. Our intelligence suggests they will launch their attack within 2 weeks." Hayes nodded slowly. He set down the datapad and walked to the window of his quarters. Outside, he could see the Earth floating in the darkness of space. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in patterns he had memorized as a child. 8 billion people lived down there. They went to work. They fell in love. They raised their children and dreamed of the future. Most of them did not know about the Krath. Most of them did not know about the fleet that protected them. They simply lived their lives, trusting that someone was keeping them safe. Hayes would not let them down. "Contact all ship commanders," he said quietly. "Tell them to prepare for immediate departure." Peters hesitated. "Sir, we are going to the Morth Nebula? The Krath expect us to wait here and cower in fear. They expect us to beg for mercy when their fleet arrives." Hayes turned to face his young officer. "We are going to show them how wrong they are. We will not wait for death to come to us. We will take the fight to them." He walked past Peters toward the door. 40 years we have hidden in the shadows. 40 years we have built and planned and trained. The time for hiding is over. Today, humanity shows the galaxy what we are made of." The order went out across the fleet. 3,000 ships powered up their engines. 3,000 crews took their stations. And 3,000 captains plotted a course for the Morth Nebula. The hunt was about to begin. But the Krath had made a terrible mistake. They thought they were the hunters, thought they were wrong. The Morth Nebula was a wound in the fabric of space. Crimson gas clouds swirled around dying stars that pulsed with angry red light. It was a place of death, where ancient suns came to breathe their last. The Krath had chosen it as their staging ground because they believed it represented their purpose. They were the bringers of death. They were the cleaners of the galaxy. Supreme Commander Vorath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Fury. His body was covered in thick gray hide that no blade could pierce. His eyes burned with a yellow fire that spoke of endless hunger. 3 rows of sharp teeth filled his mouth, and his voice was like gravel being crushed beneath a boot. "Status report," he growled, his second in command. A younger Krath named Torax stepped forward with a tablet in his clawed hands. "All 10,000 ships are in position, Supreme Commander. The fleet is ready to advance on the human homeworld." Vorath smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see. "Excellent. These humans have no idea what is coming for them. Our scouts report they have fewer than 100 small vessels. They call them a navy." He laughed, and the sound echoed through the bridge like thunder in a cave. "A navy. They are insects playing at being warriors. Shall the first give the order to advance?" Torax asked. "Soon. Let them wait a little longer. Let them tremble in fear as they watch our fleet grow. When we finally come for them, I want their spirits already broken." Vorath walked to the massive window at the front of his bridge. The Krath fleet stretched out before him like a sea of metal and fire. 10,000 ships of various sizes filled the nebula. Destroyers with their twin plasma cannons. Cruisers bristling with missile launchers. Battleships the size of small moons. And at the center of it all, the command carriers that held the elite warriors who would land on Earth and slaughter its people face to face. This was the greatest military force the Krath had ever assembled. Nothing in the galaxy could stand against it. The elder species of the Council hid behind their treaties and pretended to be neutral, but Varth knew the truth. They were afraid. They remembered what the Krath had done to species who challenged them in the past, and now it was humanity's turn to learn that lesson. Supreme Commander! A sensor officer suddenly shouted from across the bridge. His voice was high with panic. "We are detecting energy signatures at the edge of the nebula." Vorath turned slowly. "What kind of signatures?" I don't know, sir. The readings make no sense. There is nothing there one moment, and then suddenly there is—" The officer's voice trailed off as he stared at his screen in disbelief. "There is what?" Vorath demanded. Before the officer could answer, space itself seemed to tear open. Points of blinding white light appeared at the edge of the nebula, growing larger and larger until they became doorways to somewhere else. Through those doorways came ships—human ships. They poured out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Row after row of vessels emerged from the light, taking up positions with military precision. They were not like the crude shuttles the Krath scouts had reported. These were warships. Real warships. Their hulls were angular and covered in armor that gleamed like polished iron. Weapon systems jutted from every surface. More guns than any Krath designer would have considered practical. Varth felt something he had not experienced in decades. He felt surprise. How many? He whispered. The sensor officer's claws were trembling as he worked his console. 3,000 ships, Supreme Commander. Possibly more. They are still arriving. 3,000 ships. The humans were not supposed to have 300 ships. Where had they come from? How had they built them without anyone knowing? Then a voice came over the communication system. It was calm and clear, speaking in the common tongue of the galaxy. Every ship in both fleets heard it at the same moment. "This is Admiral Daniel Hayes of the United Earth Navy. I am speaking to Supreme Commander Varth and the Krath hegemony." Varab's yellow eyes narrowed. He did not respond, but he listened. "You have declared your intention to destroy my species. You have called us weak. You have called us prey. You have made plans to murder 8 billion innocent people because you believe no one can stop you." The human fleet had finished arriving. 3,000 ships now faced 10,000 Krath vessels across the crimson clouds of the nebula. They did not retreat. They did not spread out to flee. They held their formation like soldiers waiting for the order to charge. "I am here to tell you that you have made a mistake. The biggest mistake of your lives. Humanity is not weak. We simply chose not to show our strength. Humanity is not prey. We are predators who learn to hide their teeth." On the bridge of the Eternal Fury, Torax stepped close to Varth. "Supreme Commander, should we open fire?" "We still outnumber them 3-1. Vorath held up one massive hand for silence. He wanted to hear what this human had to say. 40 years ago, your kind looked at our world and saw nothing worth fearing. You saw us fighting among ourselves and assumed we could not unite. You saw our primitive technology and assumed we could not learn. You saw a young species and assumed we would be easy to destroy." There was a pause, and when the human admiral spoke again, his voice had grown cold. "You assumed wrong." At the front of the human formation, a massive ship moved forward. It was larger than anything the Krath had ever built. Its hull was covered in strange patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Weapons the size of Krath destroyers lined its sides. This was the USS Iron Resolve, and it was a nightmare made real. "I am offering you one chance," Admiral Hayes continued. "One chance to turn your fleet around and go home. One chance to live. Surrender now, and we will let you leave. Continue on your path of destruction, and we will end you. All of you. Every ship. Every warrior. Every last one of you will die here today." Varath's teeth ground together with rage. No one had ever spoken to him this way. No species had ever dared to threaten the craft. "You have 30 seconds to respond," Hayes said. "After that, the talking ends." Torax looked at his commander with uncertainty in his eyes. "Sir, what are your orders?" Varath's massive hands curled into fists. Pride burned in his chest like fire. He was supreme commander of the Krath hegemony. He had conquered 100 worlds. He had killed millions with his bare hands. He would not bow to some hairless ape from a worthless planet. "All ships," he roared into the fleet communication channel. "Open fire! Destroy them all." 10,000 Krath ships turned their weapons toward the human fleet. Plasma cannons charged. Missile bays opened. The Krath were ready to unleash hell, but the humans fired first dot, and in that moment, the galaxy changed forever. The first wave of human weapons crossed the distance between the fleets in less than a second. Kinetic rounds the size of cars flew through space at a fraction of the speed of light. They hit the forward line of Krath destroyers before their shields could even activate. The impacts were catastrophic. Hull plating crumpled like paper. Engine cores ruptured and exploded. 30 Krath ships died in the first heartbeat of the battle. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve with his hands clasped behind his back. His face showed no emotion as he watched the destruction unfold on the holographic display before him. He had spent 40 years preparing for this moment. He would not celebrate until it was over. "All batteries, continue firing," he ordered calmly. "Target their cruisers next. Kevin, coordinate the fleet movements." Chief Tactical Officer Kevin Marshall worked his console with the speed and focus of a man who had trained his entire life for this day. His fingers danced across the controls as he sent orders to every ship in the fleet. "Formation Alpha. Attack Pattern 7. Concentrate fire on Sector 12. The human fleet moved like a single organism. Every ship knew its role. Every captain understood the plan. They had run simulations of this battle 1,000 times. Now they were doing it for real. The Krath returned fire with everything they had. Plasma bolts screamed across the void. Missiles streaked toward human vessels in great swarms. The sky lit up with the fury of 10,000 ships unleashing death. But something was wrong. Something the Krath had never seen before. Human shields absorbed their plasma fire like water soaking into sand. The energy simply vanished, leaving the hull beneath untouched. Krath missiles detonated against armor that repaired itself faster than it could be damaged. Ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting, kept moving, kept killing. Commander Ryan Peters led the destroyer, squadron known as the Wolfpack, through the heart of the Krath formation. His ship, the USS Relentless, carved a path of destruction through enemy lines. Plasma lances mounted on the destroyer's bow cut through Krath vessels like a hot knife through butter. "Hard to port," Peters shouted. "Target that command ship." The Wolfpack turned as one, 8 destroyers moving in perfect formation. They focused their fire on a massive Krath carrier that was trying to launch firecraft. The combined assault tore through the carrier's shields and ripped open its hull. Atmosphere vented into space. Bodies tumbled into the void. The carrier broke apart in a series of explosions that lit up the nebula. "That is kill number 47, Peters said with grim satisfaction. "Find me another target." On the other side of the battle, Lieutenant Nicole Gray pushed her strike craft through a maze of debris and weapons fire. She was small for a pilot, with short blonde hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. Her call sign was Ghost, and she had earned it by being almost impossible to hit. Her squadron of 12 fighters weaved through the Krath fleet like insects. They were too small and too fast for the enemy's main weapons to track. But their own missiles carried antimatter warheads that could cripple ships 100 times their size. "Go squadron, follow my lead," Nicole said into her communicator. "We are going for their power cores. One run. Make it count." She dove toward a Krath battleship that was hammering away at the human cruiser line. Her targeting computer locked onto the weak point in its armor, a small gap near the engine section where the hull plates met. She fired 2 missiles and pulled up hard. The missiles flew true. They penetrated the gap and detonated inside the ship. The antimatter reaction consumed the engine core in a flash of pure white light. The battleship split in half and tumbled away, dead before its crew even knew what had hit them. "Direct hit," Nicole reported. Moving to next target. Back on the Eternal Fury, Supreme Commander Vorath watched his fleet die. The holographic display showed red symbols winking out one by one. Each symbol was a ship. Each ship held hundreds of Krath warriors. Thousands were dying with every passing minute. "This is impossible," Torax whispered beside him. "They're weapons. Our shields cannot stop them. Our armor cannot protect us. Silence." Vorath roared. But there was fear in his voice now. Real fear. He had never faced an enemy like this. He had never seen his warriors cut down so easily. He opened a channel to his entire fleet. "All ships, concentrate fire on their flagship. Destroy the Iron Resolve and the humans will break." What remained of the Krath fleet turned its attention to Admiral Hayes' ship. Hundreds of plasma cannons fired at once. Thousands of missiles streaked toward the massive vessel. The attack should have overwhelmed any defense. It should have reduced the Iron Resolve to molten slag. It did neither. The Iron Resolve's shields flared, bright blue as they absorbed the assault. The adaptive armor shifted and changed, growing stronger against the Krath weapons. Return fire erupted from the flagship's batteries, each shot destroying a Krath ship with terrifying precision. Admiral Hayes did not even flinch. "Is that the best they can do?" he asked quietly. "All ships, execute Operation Hammer." And this, the human fleet had been holding back. They had been testing the Krath defenses, learning their patterns, finding their weaknesses. Now, they stopped holding back. The USS Iron Resolve opened up with its main weapons. Beams of coherent energy sliced across space, cutting through multiple ships with single shots. Kinetic accelerators fired rounds that passed through one vessel and destroyed the one behind it. Missile swarms emptied from every launcher, each warhead smart enough to find its own target. The Krath formation shattered. Ships tried to flee in every direction, but human interdiction vessels had already sealed the escape routes. There was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to hide. Vorath watched his 10,000 ships become 5,000, then 2,000, then less. The battle had lasted only 6 hours. 6 hours to destroy the greatest fleet his people had ever built. "Supreme Commander," Torax said weakly, "we must surrender. We must." A human kinetic round punched through the bridge of the Eternal Fury. Torax disappeared in a spray of blood and metal. The round continued through the ship and out the other side, leaving a hole the size of a small building. Vorath stumbled to his command chair and collapsed into it. Around him, his ship was dying. Fires burned in every corridor. The hull was cracking under the stress of multiple impacts. Warning alarms screamed their final song. He opened one last communication channel. His voice was barely a whisper. "I surrender. The Krath hegemony surrenders. Please, stop." Admiral Hayes heard the message. He let it sit in silence for a long moment. Then he gave the order. "All ships, cease fire." The guns went quiet. The missiles stopped launching. The Battle of Mars Nebula was over. Of 10,000 Krath ships, fewer than 200 remained. They drifted helplessly in the crimson clouds, their weapons destroyed, their engines dead. Humanity had lost 47 ships. The galaxy would never be the same. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Monitoring stations at the edge of the Morth Nebula had recorded everything. Within hours, every species in known space had seen the footage. They watched in stunned silence as the mighty Krath fleet was torn apart. They saw the human ships emerge from nowhere and unleash weapons that defied belief. They witnessed the impossible dawn in the crystal chamber of Valarian Prime. The Galactic Council gathered for an emergency session. The 12 elder species sat in their massive seats, but the confidence that usually filled this room was gone. In its place was something they had not felt in thousands of years: fear. High. Chancellor Zethros called the meeting to order, but his voice lacked its usual power. His silver scales had faded to a dull gray, and his ancient eyes held a confusion that no one had ever seen in them before. "You have all seen the reports," he said slowly. "You have all watched the recordings. I do not need to tell you what they mean." Representative Mylox of the Sindari Collective spoke first. Her crystalline form flickered with nervous energy. "The humans destroyed 10,000 Krath warships. They lost fewer than 50 of their own. This is not possible. This should not be possible. And yet it happened," said Representative Draxus of the Thornvar Empire. His forearms were wrapped tightly around his armored body. He was a warrior, bred from a long line of warriors, and he knew what he had witnessed. They were not lucky. They were not fighting a weakened enemy. They simply outmatched the Krath in every way. "Where did they get such technology?" asked another representative. "We scanned their world 40 years ago. They were burning dead plants for energy. They were killing each other with chemical explosives. How did they advance so quickly?" Zethro shook his head. "We do not know. Our scientists are studying the recordings, but they cannot explain what they are seeing. The human weapons are based on principles we thought were impossible to engineer." The chamber fell silent. Every representative was thinking the same thing, but none wanted to say it aloud. If the humans could do this to the Krath, they could do it to anyone. The elder species suddenly felt very old. The doors of the chamber opened. Every head turned to see who would dare interrupt an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Ambassador Katie Morrison walked across the polished floor, just as she had done weeks before. But this time, she was not alone. Admiral Daniel Hayes walked beside her, still wearing his battle uniform. Behind them came Commander Ryan Peters and Lieutenant Nicole Gray, along with a dozen other officers from the human fleet. The humans stopped at the center of the circle. They did not bow. "High Chancellor," Katie said, "we request permission to address the Council." Zethros hesitated. For 50,000 years, no species had spoken to the Council without showing proper respect. But the rules seemed different now. Everything seemed different now. "You may speak," he said. Admiral Hayes stepped forward. His gray eyes moved slowly around the circle, studying each representative in turn. These were the beings who had refused to help humanity. These were the immortals who had written off Earth as a lost cause. They looked much smaller now. 3 days ago, my fleet engaged the Krath hegemony at the Morth Nebula. You know the result. The Krath are no longer a threat to anyone. Their military power has been broken. Their homeworld has asked for terms of surrender. He paused to let the weight of those words sink in. I did not come here to gloat. I did not come here to threaten you. I came here to make something very clear. Hayes clasped his hands behind his back. Humanity does not want war. We never wanted war. For 40 years, we built our fleet in secret because we had no choice. The galaxy gave us no choice. When we asked for help, we were told to accept our fate. When we warned you of our strength, we were laughed at. You left us alone to die. His voice hardened slightly. But we did not die. We survived. We will always survive. That is what humans do. We face the impossible, and we find a way through it. We have been doing it since before your ancestors learned to walk upright. Representative Draxus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. What do you want from us? Nothing, Hayes said simply. We do not need anything from you. We can protect ourselves now. We can protect anyone we choose to protect. Ambassador Katie stepped forward beside him. Her voice was steady and calm. What we want is peace. Real peace. Not the false peace that lets the strong prey on the weak while the Council looks the other way. We want a galaxy where young species do not have to live in fear. Where no one has to build weapons in secret because they know help will never come. She looked up at High Chancellor Zethros. Humanity is asking to join the Galactic Council. Not as a junior member. Not as an observer. As a full and equal partner. We have earned that right. The Council members exchanged uncertain glances. No species had ever demanded membership before. It was always granted slowly, after centuries of observation and evaluation. But no species had ever done what humanity had done. Zethros rose from his seat. He was ancient beyond measure, but in this moment, he felt the weight of every year. The galaxy was changing. The old order was fading. Perhaps it was time to let something new take its place. The Council will deliberate on your request, he said formally. Then, softer, he added, but I believe I already know the answer. 1 week later, Earth was officially welcomed as the 13th member of the Galactic Council. Ambassador Katie Morrison took her seat among the elder species. No longer a token representative of a doomed world, but the voice of a rising power. In the years that followed, humanity did something the galaxy had never seen before. They used their strength not to conquer, but to protect. Human warships patrolled the outer rim territories, defending young species from predators. Human engineers shared their technology with those who had been left behind. Human diplomats worked to change the laws that had allowed so many innocents to die. The Krath, broken and humbled, eventually signed a treaty with Earth. Their warriors, once feared across the galaxy, learned a new way to live. Some even joined human crews, serving alongside the species they had once tried to destroy. Admiral Hayes retired to a small house on the coast of his homeland. He spent his remaining years watching the ocean and thinking about all the souls who had not lived to see this day. The men and women who had built the fleet in secret. The scientists who had worked themselves to death. The soldiers who had fallen at Marth Nebula. They had given everything so that humanity could have a future. And what a future it was. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Humanity was not prey. They were not victims. They were not a young species to be dismissed and ignored. They were survivors. They were protectors. They were the 13th species of the Galactic Council, and they were just getting started.